On behalf of the Jefferson Educational Society, welcome to the first event of the final full week of the 2025 Global Summit Speaker Series. For those keeping track, this is the 13th event in this year's series, and there are 4 more to follow. From politics to medicine, sports to space, environment to genealogy, and including, with tonight's event, comedy, I'm proud to be part of a series that really does span a wide range of important topics with these engaging events. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Chris Marsh, and I'm honored to be the chairwoman of this year's Global Summit. During my time in community development at Erie Insurance, I came to more fully appreciate the work of the Jefferson Educational Society for our city and for our region. I greatly appreciate the visionary leadership of Ferky Ferrati and the amazing team at the Jefferson that executes the work for these amazing programs, and we'd love to give them a hand tonight. Earlier, I mentioned that there are 4 events following tonight's. They include Humanity 2050, the future of our world, our universe, and ourselves, with the astronomer, educator, and author Charles Liu. That will be held at Gannon University's Yale Room at 7 p.m. tomorrow night. This Thursday, November 13th, veteran journalist, political analyst, and author Juan Williams will discuss his latest book, New Prize for These Eyes, The Rise of America's Second Civil Rights Movement. This too will be held at Gannon's Yale Room at 7 p.m. Closing out this week, we welcome Larry Sabato, political analyst, best-selling author, and founder of the University of Virginia's Center for Politics, where he leads Sabato's Crystal Ball, to explore how the medium is the message, media's impact on national politics. This will be hosted right here at the Jefferson at 7 p.m. Now, I did mention 4, and those are just 3. After a short break for the holiday, we will welcome renowned award-winning filmmaker, literary scholar, and institution builder, Henry Louis Gates, Jr., host of Discovering Your Roots, for a special event on Thursday, December 4th, at the Warner Theater, and what a way to close out this year's summit. I do hope to see you all at these upcoming events. Now, to introduce tonight's guests, I'd like to welcome to the stage someone from another organization in our neck of the woods, which we are proud to be partnering with for tonight's event, and who is doing transformational work at one of our family's favorite places. He is Vice President of Marketing and Communications at the National Comedy Center in Jamestown, New York, Gary Hahn. Gary?
Thank you so much. Good evening. In July of 1981, there was a 19-year-old college student who drove across country to NBC in Burbank, California, and slept outside all night on the hard concrete with about 20 other people, just to make sure he'd get a ticket to The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. That college student was me. And I'll never forget that moment when the NBC orchestra struck up the theme, the curtain opened, and Johnny walked out. 44 years later, I'm still in awe of what Johnny Carson meant to comedy and to American culture. Johnny, Ed McMahon, Doc Severinsen, Carson the Magnificent. You can almost hear Ed saying to Carson, "And now I hold in my hand the last envelope." Answer, sis, boom, ba. As he opens up the envelope, question, describe the sound you hear when a sheep explodes. That was one of the most famous of those, Carson. And of course, Carnack's parting blessing, may the fleas of 1,000 camels infest your armpits. That was Johnny Carson, host of The Tonight Show for 30 years, late-night pioneer and a true cultural icon. At the National Comedy Center, the nation's official cultural institution for comedy, just 40 minutes from here, we celebrate legends like Lucille Ball, George Carlin, Carl Reiner, and we're especially proud to feature Johnny Carson, the immersive experience, a one-of-a-kind exhibit honoring the king of late night. Thanks to Chicago-based writer and author Mike Thomas, a new generation is rediscovering Carson the Magnificent through his book co-written with the late Bill Zehme. Mike joins us tonight along with Journey Gunderson, Executive Director of the National Comedy Center and the Lucille Ball Desi Arnaz Museum, and my boss, and Steve Scully, Director of JES's Brock Institute and a Senior Advisor for Strategic Development, for a fun, funny, and engaging conversation on the life and legacy of Johnny Carson and the enduring impact of comedy. It's my absolute pleasure to say, here's Mike, Journey, and Steve.
Gary, how'd we do with the song? You remember that? By the way, Doc Severinsen is still alive at 98.99. Welcome to both of you.
It's on. Now can you hear me? There we go.
Now it's on. There we go.
I was going to say, nicely done, Gary. You really committed
intro
to the closing.
Hey, Mike, let me begin with you. You were at the museum today.
I was.
First time you literally wrote the book on Johnny Carson. So,
Part of it anyway.
did you feel his presence today?
I did. I mean, the whole museum, and I've told Journey this, and Gary, was phenomenal. If you have not been to this museum, especially if you're a comedy geek like me, but even if you're not, it is immersive and expansive and just all-encompassing. And so I was absolutely blown away. I could have spent all day there, as a matter of fact, but Ferky and I went for a couple hours, and just a tremendous visit. So thank you for that.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, oh, God, it's all real.
Real quickly, how did it come about? Obviously, Lucille Ball is Jamestown, New York, but it's much more than that.
Right. Lucille Ball said Jamestown officials approached her in the late 80s and said, "We've been remiss in not celebrating your legacy here in town." And Lucille Ball said to Jamestown, "Don't just celebrate me. Don't just build a Lucille Ball museum. Make my hometown a destination for the celebration of all comedy." Because she had experienced a lifetime and an entire career of people not respecting comedy on the same plane as other traditional classical art forms. So it took us a few decades, but we host the Lucille Ball Comedy Festival and established the first national archive for the art form. No nonprofit, no institution had stepped up to preserve the material heritage or story of the art form until now, and so we now have the National Archive and Museum.
And by the way, there's a display afterwards, some information and passes and tickets, so get information on that after the program. Mike, Jack Parr is going to retire, and NBC's trying to figure out what they're going to do with The Tonight Show.
Yeah, and initially, I mean, they offered it to Carson once, and he turned it down.
Because
Because he didn't want to work that hard. He had been doing this show called Who Do You Trust for a long time, I think 5 years by then, and it was a pretty cushy gig, and it didn't require that many hours, and I think he was making like $2,500 a week or something, which to him was great money. I mean, he'd make $25 million a year in the coming years, but he initially turned it down, but then they came back to him, and he finally said yes, but he wasn't able to get out of his contract with ABC for a while, and so they had a cavalcade of guest hosts after Parr left in March until Carson was contractually able to start in October, and he had to stand there watching this cavalcade of guest hosts, essentially do the job he had been hired to do, and he was a little trepidatious about that.
the show in New York, and we've focused on so many heavy issues. We thought, let's take a break on a very cold and chilly night, and let's have some laughs. So let's begin with, I think, one of the most iconic early moments of The Tonight Show, when it was still in New York, 1965. And you've got to listen to the end of this clip. It runs about 1:20, but the ending clip is quintessential Johnny Carson. Let's watch.
What is the trick on it? You underhanded?
No.
Overhanded
It's
then.
an overhand throw. The trick is to keep your arm extended, and that way you break the microphone. You keep your arm extended and put only one revolution on the... once around on the way. But that's indefinite.
All right.
Mike, 60 years later, we are still laughing at this. This gentleman up front knew exactly the clip that I was going to play.
You know what's coming, but you still laugh at it.
Why?
It's just, it's a kind of a racy joke for the time, but you laugh too because Johnny milks it. He knows how to hold the audience before he spits out that punchline. And so that was part of it. He milked that tension. Even after they laughed, I think they were waiting to see what he was going to say because he kept Ed there. But it's a great moment.
But, Journey, the impromptu nature of Carson's humor, I'm going to show another example in just a moment, but that was not scripted.
No.
Right. I always like to harken back to NPR TV critic David Bianculli says that's the moment Carson becomes Carson. And you see him find this mastery of the moment. He didn't create the moment, but he managed it.
Yeah.
And it's a masterclass for any comedian in the use of silence and letting the moment breathe. And of course, it's great improv. And so he goes from performer to a conductor of, reacting to, and he stays present. Anyone who's studied improv knows you have to stay present to do something that well, and he does.
So we could go on for hours. There are just so many Carson moments. I try to select some of the most iconic that kind of represent Johnny Carson, and it's so well chronicled in this book. And talk about how the book came about in Bill's work on this, Mike.
I came to this book very late. Bill started work on it in, probably 2002, after he had done a big magazine piece on Johnny for Esquire. And prior to 2002, Bill had spent about a decade getting inside Johnny's world. He would stop by Johnny's offices, his post-retirement offices in Santa Monica, and he got to know Johnny's staff and his nephew and the woman who ran the office, Helen Sanders, and they came to trust him. And so they let him into Johnny's world, including Johnny, who would stop by the offices once in a while, got to know Bill. So by the time he wanted to write the Esquire piece, Johnny trusted him enough to sit down with him. And it was shortly after that Bill and his editor decided to expand this into a book. Little did Bill know that it would be such an undertaking. He had written books, and I had helped him on books when I was coming up, on people like Andy Kaufman and Frank Sinatra. Very different figures, especially Sinatra, who lived his life so outwardly. Johnny was a very sort of inward guy and revealed most of himself on the air on The Tonight Show. And so it became this, there was a lot of toil involved, and Bill spent 10, 11 years on this. And he got cancer in 2013 and had to shelve the project. And so it sat on the shelf for a decade. And then about 3 months, 4 months, maybe 5 after he died, his editor from Simon & Schuster called and wanted to know if I wanted to take a stab at finishing this book for Bill, who was my mentor. He taught me how to make books back when I was in my 20s. And so after some thought and after diving into all Bill's archives, he had a giant storage locker. It was like a scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark, finding all these artifacts in there. He kept everything. I mean, there was like a big pink check from Doc Severinsen, or for Doc Severinsen from Johnny. There was like an ugly necktie. Anything you can imagine was in this storage locker. And so I went back to John, his editor, and said, okay, I'll take a stab at this. I thought it would be great to sort of come full circle and to finally get this book out into the world. So that was very long-winded, but that's how it came about.
Well, thank you for that. So 1979, you mentioned Doc Severinsen is filling in for Ed McMahon, and one of the most frequent guests on The Tonight Show was Don Rickles. Well, in 1976, Don Rickles was doing a show called CPO Sharkey, which was being filmed literally in the studio next door. So let me take you back to that moment as we bring Johnny Carson into this conversation.
Uh-oh. What the hell happened to this? You know how long I've had this cigarette box on this desk?
You brought that up from New York City?
I brought this from New York. What on earth?
It happened last night.
Who?
Don Rickles.
I did not see the
Don
show
Rickles
last
did it last night. He's taping across the hall. CPO Shark.
Can I get over there? Can I get over there? I don't give a damn if they're on the air. Rickles! Rickles, hold! Stop the taping. Stop the taping. Somebody broke my cigarette box. I just started the show. I picked my box up off my desk that I've had for 9 years. My box is broken. They told me you broke it on the show last night.
Well, I really...
You big dummy!
No, but I'm sorry about the box.
Well, so am
I will come up with something.
Well, I hope so.
But just keep me on your show. You mean so much to me. Can I?
No,
Please.
No. Don't humble yourself.
Please, I want to be with you so bad.
Don't humble yourself, brother. I want something back. Okay, carry on.
Help me.
Carry on. Good seeing you. Johnny Carson. They know who I am. What the hell? Wait a minute. Why do you always do that? Johnny Carson. They know who I am. Don Rickles. What is that? Do your show. I'm going back to work.
Sure. What do you think?
Well, I think it felt like an exciting moment to witness if you were sitting there at home and to see two legends have true affection for each other. Like the warmth in that clip is real. To see two legends who are friends is incredible. And not all funny people like to invite other legends who are toe-to-toe to be in moments with them all the time, and these two enjoyed that, and if they're having fun, so is the audience. So it's just a great moment in television history.
You know, when I was at the Comedy Center yesterday and I was talking to Gary, you kind of felt like you were in the club. And one of the moments from the video you have is that there was no inside edition. There was no Access Hollywood. So The Tonight Show, Mike, was it, correct? I mean, if you wanted to stay up late and feel like you were kind of part of this elite club, you tuned in.
You had to watch The Tonight Show. That's where all the established and up-and-coming comics were, and that's where they were discovered a lot of the time. I mean, you know, they could be discovered in the clubs, but this went out to, 9 million people a night, and so, it was tremendous exposure for these folks.
In the book, you describe the Carson persona, and I was trying to find the right moment to have him describe his own personality, and I came across this from 1979 in a 60 Minutes interview with Mike Wallace that I think captures what you and Bill write in the book. Let's watch.
There's a stereotype of Carson. You know there is.
What is it? What is it?
It is ice water in his veins.
I had that taken out years ago. I went to Denmark and had that done. It's all over now.
Shy, defensive.
I can remember when I was in high school. If I pulled out my old high school annual book and read some of the things,
People might say, oh, he's conceited, he's aloof. Actually, that was more shy. See, when I'm in front of an audience, it's a different thing. Why? I'm in control.
That's a key to Carson, control. Professionally, he insists upon it. Socially, he can't demand it, so he retreats. He's uncomfortable. And the fact is that he is shy.
There's Carson the performer, and there's Carson the private individual. And I can separate the two.
A day in the professional life of Johnny Carson. The morning is given to reading half a dozen newspapers and magazines, looking for grist for the mill of that evening's monologue. He is a man of habit. And at 1 o'clock, the family cook, Lisette, gives him lunch in a brown paper bag. Then into the garage and his Mercedes sports car for the 40-minute drive to beautiful downtown Burbank and the NBC factory. No chauffeurs, no entourage.
Does that capture the Johnny Carson that you researched?
Yeah, it does perfectly. I mean, Johnny was, he was still himself on the air, but he was like 1.5 times himself, you know, and he was more revealing in a lot of ways publicly than he was privately, especially with people he didn't know. But yeah, Johnny was not good at parties. He didn't like making small talk. Johnny was perfectly able to spend lots of time on his own. He loved to read. He loved to use his telescopes. He loved to just learn. He was very curious and play tennis and go to movies. And, you know, he didn't have to be that public guy all the time. He was definitely not on all the time. He could flip the switch.
Journey Late Night is under fire. Obviously, Stephen Colbert is being let go, ostensibly because it's going to cost a lot of money. Critics say it's because of the politics of where we're at today. What is your thought about late night television today and how Johnny Carson might view Colbert and Jimmy Fallon and Steve Kimmel?
So we talk about this a lot, and it's easy, I think it's too easy for people to say, oh, well, Carson would be different now, and it's impossible to parse this without taking into account what was going on in the time period. And so I think it's it's easy for people to say, oh, Carson wouldn't have been political. So kind of 3 things. I think Carson was sticking to what came most natural to him. His authentic comedic voice was not, he did not have a natural propensity toward being political. And we saw with Stephen Colbert, when he gets his show, he started out a little more in the center, a little more mild. But comedy broadly, anyone in comedy will say that they find their footing and they find success when they are true to their authentic point of view and comedic voice. So it was his authenticity. The other thing is he's beholden to a broad viewership. When he's considering The Room, just by virtue of how few channels there are, it's not like today and it's not even like 20 years ago, he's considering that he really is speaking to the entire nation. There is not the convenience of being able to find your tribe on multiple channels. So he was realistic about that. But third, even though we know it was probably his nature to want to comfort rather than throw gas on any fire that might be going on, he started in 1962. And so it very well could be that he's reading The Room in a way that's conscious or subconscious about what the nation needed. In '63, JFK is shot. And the Vietnam War has been going on for a few years, but in '64, just 2 years after he's on air, the draft starts. So what audience is more on edge than one who could have their child taken away in a lottery system? And you heard him say the word control. One of the things Carson was so good at, besides just being funny, is that he was always in control. And so, and people felt that, and people needed that. I mean, in '68, you have RFK, you have Martin Luther King Jr., and you have the peak of the death toll in Vietnam. So just looking at his early years in late night, I think it's probably really informed by his overwhelming sense of his role is not to make people feel more emotional. There's plenty of that. His role is not to make them think critically about anything more than they already have had to that day. And his role is just to ease the tension and be cathartic and make them laugh. And that was his singular compass, and I think it worked. And Gary and I were talking also about what came before him, and that Steve Allen, it was more frenetic and chaotic, and that was his style. And Parr was more emotional and put himself into it and was doing interviews that were thought-provoking. And so in a way, Carson was kind of the right man for this moment, for this country.
Thanksgiving is 2 weeks away. This is your selection, so we'll play this. And, you know, Mike, it's Ed, it's Johnny, it's Doc. They're all on a first-name basis. And this is the day before Thanksgiving as Johnny and Doc have a little exchange. Let's watch.
What are you doing for Thanksgiving? We're doing a show, of course, tomorrow.
I was going to ask you if you got your turkey yet.
Sure.
Do you, truthfully, do you help Mrs. Carson prepare the turkey?
Just like you helped Mrs. Severinsen prepare the turkey.
No, there is no Mrs. Severinsen.
Oh, that's right.
There.
That's right.
There used to be.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
The fact that I never helped her stuff her bird was one of our big problems.
I thought that was your problem. Well, no, you know, I forgot all about that. We've been together so long that I forget sometimes where we are.
Which wife are we on?
On various Thanksgivings. No, we're gonna.
In fact, that was one of the things we really fought about.
What? Did you?
I wanted an oyster stuffing in the turkey, and she wanted bread stuffing, and she got bread stuffing and a lot of money.
You mean you used to argue about what you're going to stuff the turkey with?
Yes.
And that was one of the problems.
She's still stuffing the turkey, but not with money.
Well, it's nice to know you have no bitterness.
Well, I always used to say, you know, I mean, you can have turkey and all that. I don't like turkey that much.
Yeah.
I said, I love lasagna. She calls up every year at Thanksgiving and says, are you having your lasagna?
They don't forget, do they?
No.
I'm sorry about that.
You love this moment, don't you?
Yes, I love it because it's no celebrity guest. It's no setup punchline. It's not pre-sketched out, pre-written. And it's showing that the show was like a family. You know, they're talking about Thanksgiving. They're treating each other like family members. They're having some awkwardness. And it's free of kind of the glitz and glam. And, you know, whether it was Ed or Doc, you got this feeling like you were in the nation's living room, or they were in the living room with you. And there's a warmth and love there that it's just great.
So let's talk about political humor. We talked about Colbert, and he can be rather biting against Donald Trump. Same with Jimmy Kimmel. Carson had a very different approach, and there are two moments I'm going to share with you. But for those of you not old enough to remember, when Ronald Reagan was president, his Interior Secretary was James Watt, and the head of the PLO was Yasser Arafat. You need to know that as we watch this moment.
Jim, I don't understand why you're doing this to me.
Oval Office, Baker. Yes? You have the head of the Republic of China calling for the president. Premier Chung Dong-hu. Hold on. Mr. President, who's on the phone?
Well, now, Jim, I don't know who's on the phone.
That is correct.
What's correct?
No, he's your Secretary of the Interior.
Now, Jim, let's start all over here very quietly. Just tell me, Jim, who is on the phone?
Who is on the phone?
Who?
Yes, sir.
That Arafat guy is on the phone, Jim?
No, sir. Who is?
What?
Swimming tomorrow morning at the Y.
One of the classic moments.
Well, sure, it was an homage to Abbott and Costello, obviously. I mean, they took a good stab at it, too. That's a funny scene. But I think Johnny played political figures and did political humor without the edge we see today, because as Journey said, he had such a wide audience to appeal to, and he was not a flamethrower, and he kind of played it down the middle. I mean, he had 9 million people plus watching him a night, and also, as Journey said, that we were not siloed. We didn't have a chance to watch a show that reflected our views back to us, so he had to be as widely appealing as possible. But he didn't ever get too political. I mean, Reagan was one of the figures he loved to play, but it was always good-natured, and they were friends, too. So he was never going to do anything mean-spirited, and he was never the Reagan who, lost his memory, or as Phil Hartman played him on Saturday Night Live, an evil Reagan. Johnny was always good-natured about that stuff.
And Gary, at the journey Gary was showing me at the museum at the center, all the index cards, including how many appearances Bob Hope made on the show.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite moments for people when they exit the theater, which also has a hologram of Jimmy Fallon, often leading you through the chapters of the Johnny Carson exhibit. So you go and you're in this immersive theater with 20 different projection surfaces, very high tech, and then you exit into this quiet little hallway, and people are looking at these cards, and you're kind of going, what are these? They're very simple, and it's the Tonight Show Rolodex cards of every guest and every appearance, typewritten, over the course of 30 years. And I'll never forget when Jeff Sotzing, Johnny's nephew and a producer on the show, mailed these. He FedExed them to me, but there wasn't a lot of warning. And so I opened this box, and they're in alphabetical order, and I'm like, Monica Seles, Jerry Seinfeld, and I'm like, oh my God. So it's a great exhibit showing also handwritten annotations, maybe how they did on the show, or if they had a change in representation, but it's like a little time capsule in the form of an office typewritten Rolodex card.
Johnny Carson, Bob Hope, what was the relationship like?
I mean, Bob was on a lot, but he was not one of Johnny's favorite guests. He would come on and tell long stories, and he was a showbiz guy. He was an old school showbiz guy, and Johnny really liked to have genuine conversations on the show, and I don't think he got much of that with Bob, especially as Bob got older. I don't know if Bob was contractually able to come on the show whenever he wanted to. I have never heard that. But yeah, he was, I think Johnny would have preferred he come on a bit less than he did.
I know he loved Robin Williams, who was on a lot. And in one of his final appearances before Johnny retired in 1982, George H.W. Bush was president of the United States, and there was, again, this impromptu moment. And what's amazing as you look at this, it's just the natural laughter that Johnny Carson had in these moments. So let's watch.
That's amazing. And Bush is just out there going, well, 1,000 points of light. They're not burning anymore. Come on down. Here we go. Got a weed and seed. Here we go. I figured out how you do George Bush. Yeah. Basically, what you do is you take John Wayne and you tighten up his ass. Gonna head the wagon trains on north. Come on with me. Get a garbage.
I never thought of it. John Wayne.
Oh, it's frightening. And then,
you pilgrim. Then you just bring it up 1,000 points.
Tied right up there. There you go.
Right, sir.
Gonna head the wagon train through, cash some checks. Here we are.
The persona of Johnny Carson, take it from there if you could.
I mean, Johnny loved to laugh. If something was funny, Johnny was not a hard laugh, and comedians were thrilled when they could make him laugh. And he would often, exacerbate it by doubling over at his desk. And he really liked to reward the comics who came on a show, the ones he really liked. He let them shine. It was not about him; it was about them, because he knew they were making the show better. So his ego was kind of subverted when he was on the stage, especially with stand-ups, and they really appreciated that.
Midwestern ego? I mean, how would you describe that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have to have a sizable ego, a sense of yourself and your abilities to do what Johnny did, but he was always a Nebraska kid at heart. He didn't like bragging about the homes he had, or certainly talking about money. You hear that in the interview with Mike Wallace at 60 Minutes. Like, Mike says, well, how much do you make? And Johnny says, well, how much do you make? You never ask those questions in Nebraska. It's all very, very private. A lot of it was in the press, but Johnny was not one to to puff himself up, both because it was his nature and he didn't have to. He had the biggest forum in America and people saw him every single night. So that was Johnny. He was larger than life, but a very Midwestern guy at heart.
Yeah, and I always remember that when we interviewed Steve Martin about Johnny Carson, he said he thought that Johnny Carson had, with regard to stand-ups, Johnny had empathy for their plight. And you can see the warmth and the empathy and the generosity on the couch. You know, the monologue was his, but on the couch, he was generous. He wasn't trying to one-up anyone. He has the best values, actually, of improv, which is yes and, instead of ever shooting anyone down. And that brought out the best in every performer and allowed them to shine. So he was very unselfish and very generous when it came to sharing that space in those moments.
So last month, Johnny Carson would have turned 100 years old. He was born in 1925. And so I was getting ready for this program. I came across, from 40 years ago, an interview that he did with Mildred Holt, who at the time was 105 years old. So to your point, making these guests who were basically nobodies, but they became stars on his program. And there are countless examples of unknown individuals who became part of the Johnny Carson legacy. Here's one of those moments.
Your husband's not still living, is he?
No, he died 22 years ago.
Yeah.
And I've battled my life ever since.
Did you ever think of remarrying?
No.
Well, you thought it was all right
Never
for...
had a chance.
Never had a chance. Well, you thought it was all right for me to get remarried?
Oh, it is, because you're young.
Yeah.
I'm old.
Well, you're a remarkable old person. If there's
You
any...
never had anyone so old.
No.
Just that kind of captures his personality a little bit.
Some of the best interviews are on that show are with non-celebrities, just people he's having these real conversations with, and by whom he's really tickled, by their life stories or their quirks and their mannerisms. It was like real, genuine television. They're not out there promoting anything. They're not sticking to a certain script. It was real.
Journey, his partnership with Ed McMahon, 30 years together from the beginning. What was that like?
It's one of the great enduring collaborations and partnerships in comedy. And again, that's more unique than I think people give it credit for. Not every great comedian is collaborative. And that's one of the things that we unpack at the museum is long-standing partnerships. You probably saw it today. Carl Reiner is a great example of someone he made everyone around him better. And I think that's what Carl Reiner and Johnny Carson shared. Again, it's not something top of mind biographically, but there are certain people in comedy who can stand on their own 2 feet and are brilliant and can write the jokes or direct the films in the case of Reiner, but who also can make everyone in their orbit soar. And both of them had that, and you see that in his long-standing and enduring career-long partnership with Mel Brooks. So you can see that warmth and their rapport, and to see it play out over 30 years is a privilege.
A few months ago, you were in beautiful downtown Burbank, inside the Carson studios, which have been basically down to the brick and the cinder block. What was that like walking in that?
It was amazing. We went out there, and the producer I worked with at CBS Sunday Morning, Gabe Falcon, was somehow able to land this studio to tape a segment about Johnny. And it's so huge. I guess I knew it was, people had described it as a barn, but I had never been there before. It's just, it held almost 500 people, and you walk in there now, and it's empty, but you can almost see the ghosts and hear Doc Severinsen playing, and we taped it sitting right in the middle of the floor, a little beyond where Johnny's desk and the set would have been, and then the seats were at the far side of the room, and it was kind of magic to be in there.
Another moment, again, I love these unscripted moments, and I still remember the sponsors and a new sponsor, and this is one I think you will enjoy. What makes this so funny is you're laughing over the silliest thing, and it's between Ed McMahon and Johnny Carson, 1985. Let's watch.
Okay. Hard as a carp. Is this really frozen or is
No, it's a piece of wood.
What?
A piece of wood in there.
Well, that's not a good buy, is it? People want food. We should point out, when you go to the supermarket and buy this, you do not get a piece of wood. No. We'd like to introduce a new sponsor.
Yes. Oh. What a nice welcome you have.
Fine sponsor. Mrs. Paul's. She lost her husband, Mr. Paul. Mrs. Paul's light seafood. No, I got to get this right, because this is they're a new sponsor.
Very first appearance.
We'd like to welcome a new sponsor to the Tonight Show. Mrs. Paul's light soup. Mrs. Paul's light seafood entrees. Look. For people who like everything about seafood, except cooking it. Mrs. Paul has done that for you. That sweet old lady.
Part of the club. You're just eavesdropping into this late night conversation, about to go to bed, and America's laughing.
Johnny made you feel good at the end of the day. He relieved stress. As Bill Zehme, who wrote the book I finished, said, he was the nation's greatest security blanket. He made you feel like even if the day had been tough, the next day would come and everything would be okay. He tucked you in at night, and that was who Johnny Carson was. He was a comfort for millions of people, and I think that's why he sticks in so many people's minds decades after he went off the air. He did them a service.
By the way, we're going to get to your questions in a few minutes, and I'm just going to roam the room, so wave your hand, and I'll come to you. The monologue. I mean, that was the signature moment of Johnny Carson. How many people worked with him on this, and just how important was that to his program journey?
Well, he definitely, he didn't invent the monologue, but he certainly cemented it as the template in terms of it being the component that would kick off the show. He felt very personally about every joke, even though he didn't write every joke in the monologue. And we have the hand-annotated monologue papers now in our collection at the National Comedy Center and on display. And you can see in Carson's hand over a typewritten sheet of the monologue for the night. Reordering, that's another thing that people don't think about. They think it's either that he likes the joke or doesn't, perhaps, but just the nature of the order. If he could envision it, he could deliver it. And as Bette Midler said in our interview, he set the template. It was always very well observed, so topical, so fast. And I still can't figure out how, 30 years is such a long time to kind of stay in people's consciousness as something that they're drawn to. Even as they've become more aware of more options, people kept tuning in to Johnny Carson, and people overuse the term unmatched or unparalleled, but in his case, it's absolutely true. When he stepped down after 30 years, we had never seen no one has seen someone step down from live television night after night after a 30-year tenure, and it'll probably never be done again.
In the back of the book is the signature golf swing. How did that come about? Do you know?
By the way, when I sent this book to, I don't know if you know who Robert Smigel is from Saturday Night Live, brilliant comedy writer. He texted me back and said, "That's Tommy Smothers on the back." And I freaked out. I was like, there's no way they chose a picture of Tommy Smothers.
It does look like him.
It does, yeah. I think they had a lookalike contest at one point.
That's a great comedian prank to play on you.
I don't think he was being real about it, but I laughed at it a couple days later. But yeah, the golf swing. So as the story goes, I think he was watching his son, I believe it was Chris, have a golf lesson, and he was watching the pro show him how to swing, and somehow that swing made it into Johnny's routine. It was just, it was just a piece of space work he did on stage. Journey's been mentioning improv a lot. That they do that in improv a lot. Except Johnny, like if Stephen Colbert does that today, space work, he will put the club back in the bag. Johnny the club just disappeared. So it was the swing and then it was gone.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that was Johnny's signature move, obviously.
And just a side note, you had the Smothers Brothers a few years ago, did you not?
Yes, we had the Smothers Brothers in 2019, and you saw them in that clip in the museum. And in fact, doesn't Tommy Smothers do a Johnny Carson impression on his show at one point in that 2-year time span? And that was a privilege. And we in fact have, speaking of the politics, this became something that was widely circulated recently. We have on display at the Comedy Center from Tommy Smothers' collection, the correspondence with the White House and President Johnson. And what you see in that back and forth and in that exchange is this mutual respect. The president saying it's a privilege of being the leader of this great nation to be the target of these barbs, and it's a privilege and it comes with the territory. And there's a mutual respect that they're each doing their jobs. And so, of course, recently with Kimmel and everything going on, that was much discussed. In fact, I should also add, one of the things that warmed my heart this year, as much as anything, was arranging a meeting between Jon Stewart and Dick Smothers in Jamestown at the National Comedy Center. And so it's a great photo of the two of them. And the second people see it, whether they were there for Stewart's show or know either of them, there's this audible gasp of tracing the lineage of comedy and two heroes.
Can you just repeat what President Johnson said back in 1969? Think about this.
Let's see. I think he said it's the privilege of being a leader of this great nation to be the target of barbs. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but he calls it a privilege, and that he understands that it comes with the territory. It comes with the privilege of the office.
What a novel idea. You all get it. Anyhow, let's turn back to Johnny Carson. Let's laugh the monologue. Here's one example.
Well, the hot issue today, this is kind of interesting. According to a poll of the Los Angeles Times, 56% of the Americans polled were opposed to Reagan's plan to sell AWACS. Now, what's the official name for that? Air warning, radar surveillance planes, very sophisticated technical equipment. What is it?
Distant early warning.
Distance early warning. Well, that doesn't make up AWAC, does it? Air warning and
radar.
And radar
surveillance.
No, that spells mother. Anyway, they're very... Thank you, staff. Anyway, they're very sophisticated radar, distance warning, early system planes, radar things. What was the point of this?
I don't know.
They took a poll. What?
The poll.
That's right. No, they're selling them to the Saudis, not the Poles. Wait a minute.
Look.
Aid the press. Thank you. They took a poll. 56% of the Americans were against.
I'd forgotten the number.
What?
I'd forgotten the number.
I'm telling you, 56% were opposed to selling those planes. I'm going to take my own poll. How many people are opposed? How many are for selling the planes? I'll handle it. Let me handle it. Okay. How many are against selling? Okay. How many would prefer we use the money for technology, to grow a vegetable that would be considered ketchup? How many? I'm sorry I got into that. Distance warning. Hey, there's an A in there. A, wax. Air. Now, what's the W for?
The reason why I said that was I used to fly.
Oh, you did? For our side?
Even when he was bombing, he was funny.
He was. People loved to see him revive himself after a bomb, because that was, a lot of the times, that was even funnier than the actual joke and the monologue. And he was so good at it. You could see there, he is plugged into everything that's going on, every comment, every sound, every sign. And he was just brilliant at taking a moment that went south and bringing it north again.
He was married how many times?
He was married 4 times.
And that often became fodder for late night television.
It did, yeah. He would always make himself the butt of the jokes when it came to his divorces. I mean, sometimes he got serious about it. There was a time when one of the tabloid rags wrote something that he didn't like that was apparently not factual about one of his divorces, and he took them to task on the air. But mostly, it was giving himself the business for being married so many times.
Another moment with another regular guest. These are just such legendary names from this time period. Harvey Korman, who was always funny. And, well, let's just watch.
Somebody told me it's been almost a year since you've been on the show.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, it's been a year. What have you been doing?
Well, I come here, a double-double.
You know, I'd tell you something. I do some traveling once in a while. Like last week, I was in Utah to do the Osmond, Donnie, and Marie show. They're delightful kids, by the way. And I was playing golf with Buddy in Durham, North Carolina, a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, when you're out on the road and you're in a motel, and you're lonely, you don't know anybody, the television set becomes very important. I'm not kidding you. And it's important to connect with somebody that you know or somebody that you enjoy or like. I cannot tell you how terrible it is to tune into the Tonight Show and you ain't there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And when Ed's not there, it's so disappointing. I mean, everybody else that comes is good and all that stuff, but miss you.
Oh, well, that's
Could you come back on the old schedule? For us, you can't just think of yourself.
You want me, let me understand it. As I understand it, you want me to go back 5 nights a week just because you can't get abroad in a motel room? Is this what you're saying?
That's the truth.
I see. Because you're lonely.
But he was famous for that 3-day-a-week schedule.
He was, yeah. I mean, Johnny did a lot of work in those 3 days, but he took 3-4 months off a year, and he got paid handsomely for it, and people will give him the business about that. He had reruns one night, a guest host on another night, but he was there enough, I think, in the later years. But I mean, at first when he started doing the show, it was like 105 minutes long, and then it went to 90 minutes. He did years and years of those shows before he went to 3 days a week. But he was not shy about taking time off, and he really enjoyed his leisure time.
I don't want to call them breakups. Well, one was a breakup, Joan Rivers, because you have the Joan Rivers exhibit. By the way, that curtain that was behind Johnny in the monologue is at the center.
Yes, if you have most visitors, their jaws drop when they see the iconic rainbow curtain and realize how they can get pretty close to it and take a photo with it and everything. So we're always saying, yes, it's the real curtain, believe it or not. But we did just cut the ribbon in August on the Joan Rivers joke file, which, if you've ever seen the documentary piece of work, is a card catalog that spans the 1950s through 2014, and it holds 67,000 typewritten jokes of Joan Rivers' career. And when we talk about Johnny Carson's legacy, it's impossible to separate Joan from that. And again, talk about launching someone's entire career and a woman on television. He first put her on in 1965. We weren't seeing a lot of women in stand-up in 1965. And for Joan, again, I always think about the plight of the stand-up. She's a woman touring the country in clubs alone in the 1960s. And so these breaks literally meant her life. And then to evolve into being his permanent guest host, it's a decades-long relationship. I have empathy for, wherever you stand on this story. She's offered her own late-night show from Fox, and Johnny hears about it before she tells him, and they never speak again after that.
Jay
He never speaks ill of her, I should say that.
Yeah.
You know, people will always want to surmise or fill in blanks, but I don't think it's responsible to fill it in. He never spoke poorly of her, never spoke ill of her. And he also made her career, or welcomed her talent. You know, she obviously worked really hard, and you can see her work ethic. There are a lot of parallels in terms of the precision of the craft. And I think he saw it. Even with the Robin Williams clip, the word curator came to mind, and that's probably because we're in the curation business. We built a museum. We're not the comedians, but we curate for everyday visitors of generations to come and 20-somethings who don't know why they're supposed to care about Joan Rivers or Johnny Carson. But Johnny Carson was not just a master comedian, a master curator. And thanks to him, we have Joan Rivers. You know, he curated the talent that he was going to introduced to the nation, and he took that role very seriously, and thank goodness he did.
Jay Leno, David Letterman, an interesting juxtaposition, and they both made their mark on Carson's program. Carson leaves in 1982. Jay Leno takes over the following Monday. Never an acknowledgement on his show by Jay Leno. Why?
No, 92. The story goes that Helen Kushnick, his manager, had told him, you know, we don't want you to be compared to Carson, and so probably best not to mention Johnny when you're taking over the show. And, you know, and so that's what happened. But Jay soon, you know, sort of found the error of his ways and issued a mea culpa and said, yeah, I should have done that. Of course, I should have acknowledged what came before me for 30 years. So, yeah, that turned into bad publicity for Jay. He just swore he was listening to his manager and it was not maliciously intended. And I believe him. He respected Johnny, and he was a host innumerable times on the Tonight Show and a guest, and he respected the format and how Johnny was a pioneer. So he never, I don't think, meant to hurt Johnny at all.
David Letterman, what was the relationship like between the two? Because one of his last appearances after he left the Tonight Show was on Letterman's
Letterman.
program.
Yeah, I think Dave revered Johnny, and Johnny deeply respected Dave, and it almost struck me as a father-son relationship. In fact, they did a Rolling Stone cover together, and it looks like a father and his son on the cover. It was, he respected Dave's talent, and where Dave was sort of headed with this format that Johnny had pioneered, and Johnny literally kind of owned the spot after him that Dave filled for those years. So, Johnny was able to kind of mentor him and give him advice and show him by example along the way. And that is the first place he went after announcing his retirement. Dropped like a bombshell, and then he came and went on Dave's show.
You want to say something?
Just that when it came to Jay Leno, and I remember from behind the scenes when we set forth to do the exhibit in 2022, and we were shooting interviews as we were still coming out of COVID, and it was very difficult. Jay Leno was a quick yes, and there's important context to that. The people we were interviewing, Mel Brooks, Bette Midler, Steve Martin, Martin Short, George Wallace, there was no reason. We're the National Comedy Center in Jamestown. We are an authority on the subject matter. We have the National Archive. But it's not saying yes to anything that's going to get them major airtime or publicity, and certainly not money. And so when we would get the yes, it tells you everything about Johnny Carson. And for Jay Leno to very quickly, when he's a busy person who's still touring, say, absolutely, I will sit down and sit with your crew and talk about Johnny's legacy, I think it tells you all you need to know about the level of respect that stands to this day.
And yet, despite it all, and I'm going to show you a little clip on one of his final shows, Carson was very humble. He never really wanted to draw a lot of attention to what happened behind the scenes. He wanted the show to kind of speak for itself. Is that a fair assessment, Mike?
Yeah, like I said, like I learned, a lot of stuff was revealed on the show. Yeah, and he didn't want to air dirty laundry or anything like that, but a lot of stuff about his life and about the people he worked with, about their lives, it was all revealed on the air. That was real television.
So here's, in one of his final shows, the Carson production went behind the scenes. It runs about 7 minutes. I just pulled about a minute and a half, so we'll watch.
Jeffrey.
All right, sir.
Get warm again.
That's great, huh?
Wonderful.
The studio holds 465 people, and we'll fill up every last seat. So if there's room, we will get you a seat.
Endless amount of mail Mr. Carson receives. Probably 10,000 pieces a week.
Alex didn't talk to you about this, did she?
Hello there, feature film freaks. Art Fern here with today's feature film.
That's it. That's a monologue. It's officially monologue.
All right, let's get it to Johnny. Best seat in the house, I think, really.
It's about 5 minutes till 5. We'll do the show at 5:30, and we'll do it in real time.
Beauty time.
Basically, this is what John sees as he sits here at the desk.
Is that Stevie?
Yeah.
Oh, he's doing my favorite song. I'll be seeing you.
I'll be seeing you, right?
So you compared Carson to a conductor. I mean, it really is, the behind the scenes is, again, this is in the early 1990s, so no email, limited computer, no Wi-Fi, no computers to speak of. It was all index cards, that old-fashioned typewriter, and a whole team.
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody had seen ever before how the sausage was made before then. And Johnny really was the captain of that ship, and it was not an easy job. In fact, I think when he took the Tonight Show initially, when he was offered it, I can't remember the name of the president of NBC, but he said Johnny could go make a lot more money at an easier job. I mean, this job was not for, shrinking violets or whatever the term is. You really had to work hard, and you had to know your stuff.
So he retired in 1992. Was it an easy decision for him? Did he just feel 30 years the time is right? Because every couple of years he'd debate publicly, should I renegotiate with NBC?
I mean, he would always say, all along the way, I think I'm going to retire. I can't imagine lasting 5 more years, or I can't imagine lasting 3 more years. And he would constantly, renegotiate his contract as he was getting more viewers, and they charged more for advertising, and his rates went up. And finally in 1992, he dropped the bombshell at the upfronts, the NBC upfronts, and said, I'm going to retire. I'm sorry, it was 1991. It was a year before he retired. And they were their jaws were on the floor. Even the higher ups said they had no idea he was going to do that. And he was a cash cow for NBC. He was making, the Tonight Show was 17 to 20% of the profits of NBC when he was at his height. And so they literally couldn't afford to lose Johnny. And so when that happened, that final year was a whirlwind, and they had to scramble to figure out how they were going to fill that hole. I mean, who's going to watch, Johnny's successor? So.
Yeah, and it feels like it was a really smart decision, because at that time you're seeing some mockery of the institution of late night, like even on Saturday Night Live or with Dana Carvey, they're kind of making fun of the tradition. And so there was just a different feel and a vibe in the air about what was funny, and people wanted something less formal, more self-aware, self-deprecating. And so I think he was just really smart to know when to leave the stage and leave it all on the floor. And before, he didn't want to leave kind of descending, and he left when he was still really strong. And I think that was a really smart move. Yeah, and he would, I mean, to Journey's point, Dana Carvey would impersonate him on these Tonight Show sketches with Phil Hartman as Ed McMahon, saying yes, and he was drunk on the air, and it was hilarious. But Johnny would say, "Well, they're making fun of me now. I think it's time to leave." And also Arsenio Hall had come onto the air, and he was this sort of cool, hip
urban version of Johnny, and people were flocking to his show. And here's Arsenio on billboards above Sunset Boulevard. And so, the Tonight Show had become kind of ripe after 30 years. And I think Johnny was all about timing. Johnny was a master of timing, and I think he really knew when to step off the stage.
A couple years later, he got the Kennedy Center Honors and ABC's Ted Koppel with a narration that they used at the Kennedy Center. It's still called the John F. Kennedy Center, by the way. Thank you for catching that, Gary. Anyhow, let's roll the video.
But television burns most brightly in the dark, and the man who owned the night was Jack Paar. When he quit, they said no one could carry the weight. Least of all a low-key daytime game show guy. He went out there as Johnny Carson and stayed that way for 30 years.
To all the girls who shared my life, now are someone else's wife. I'm glad they came along. I dedicate this song to all the girls I've loved before.
I don't really want to handle this because they could break, couldn't they?
This is a little sleeping bird. Isn't that cute?
Yeah.
See, that's sleeping.
Now this is a...
The candle.
That's a nice little candle.
That's a candle.
Wow.
Look at this one, Johnny.
See if you look an animal right in the face and talk to them, you'd say, then they know you're not scared.
He earned his success night after night and grew into a permanent, reassuring fixture of American life. Our measure of comic grace.
Good evening, this is Walter Cronkite. For the past 19 years, I've been sitting at this desk reporting all of the major news stories in the world. Tonight is my final broadcast, and I would like to add one personal note. For God's sakes, knock off that tickety, tickety, tickety song.
Some classic moments. We'll get to your questions. Raise your hand. Just a couple of quick thoughts. Mike, Journey?
There'll never be anybody like him. I mean, Johnny was always 100% himself. He might have been an amplified version of himself, but his advice to other performers was always be yourself and tell the truth. And that's what he always did on The Tonight Show. And he had this tight relationship with his audience as a result.
Journey?
Well, if our job is to put things into perspective, I'm not the biggest Carson expert on this stage right now, but we always reflect, what did he mean in the pantheon of comedy? There will be no one else like this and nothing else like it in terms of a launch pad, and his resonance and his impact goes beyond even what was happening on television. His show, because it would change the lives and launch the careers of anyone who was on it. Byron Allen said, comedians have two birthdays, your actual birthday and your first time on Johnny Carson. And it literally, it's not an overstatement, could make your entire career. And you could go on for 30 years to be a comedian juggler, and that moment changed your life. And I get the privilege of now touring stand-ups through the museum before they headline the Lucille Ball Comedy Festival. So whether it's Bill Murray or Jon Stewart or Tom Segura or Nate Bargatze or Jeff Foxworthy, who was brought to tears as he was remembering what that felt like to be on Carson, and it sends him down memory lane. He's saying, it's going so well that it's going badly, because his laughs that he's getting are longer than he had done the math to fit into the set. And so he's mentally editing his own stand-up set on Johnny Carson as it's happening because it's going so well. So it's also a mental disaster for him. So he's reliving all of that. He's brought to tears. And whether, again, it's Jon Stewart or Bill Murray, they're all mesmerized by this person who was the king, and to know what it was like to receive the king's blessing. Stand-ups literally went from thinking you had to live in New York City to be a successful stand-up to thinking now, because Johnny's in LA, the move, if we want to have a trajectory in a career, is to be in LA. And that's partly because of the trajectory set by Freddie Prinze. You know, he's on the show once, he's called over to the couch, he's the first stand-up to have that happen when he's in his first performance, and within a year he has a sitcom. Suddenly, for any stand-up performer, there's a roadmap to success that has just been charted, and the road goes through Johnny Carson and Burbank.
And he always downplayed that, his sort of king-making role, but it was true. Richard Belzer, the comic, used to call even this sign, if Johnny gave you this A-OK sign, he called it a gesture from God, because 9 million other people saw that, producers saw it, directors saw it, and your career could be made literally overnight because of Johnny.
There are a lot of great stories in this book. You can think about this for a moment. If there's one that you want to share that particularly captures Johnny Carson, but I'm going to work the room, so wave your hand. And Gary, I'm going to start with you for the first question, then I'll come to you the back here. But I'm going to give you the honor of the first question.
Wow. Well, I guess my first question would be about that final episode. And 50 million people watched. To me, there have been finales after that, but to me, it was probably the last great finale for TV. And I'm just curious what Mike and Journey have to say about both. Well, there were really two final episodes, right? It was Bet and Robin Williams on the penultimate episode, and then it was Johnny all more or less by himself for the final one, and what that meant to comedy, to television, and to America. You know, that was May 22nd, 1992. I cried myself.
You didn't camp out before that?
I didn't camp out, no.
Well, we have, why don't we play it now? We have Johnny Carson's farewell from that final show. Let's watch.
And so it has come to this. I am one of the lucky people in the world. I found something I always wanted to do, and I have enjoyed every single minute of it. I want to thank the gentlemen who've shared this stage with me for 30 years, Mr. Ed McMahon, Mr. Doc Severinsen, and you people watching. I can only tell you that it has been an honor and a privilege to come into your homes all these years and entertain you. And I hope when I find something that I want to do and I think you will like and come back, that you'll be as gracious inviting me into your home as you have been. I bid you a very heartfelt good night.
So, Mike, as you hear that, his final appearance, and to Gary's question.
I'm just thinking when I look at that, Johnny rarely showed emotion on the air. He was such a cool cat. Even when he did a 5-minute eulogy for his son Ricky, who died in 1991, he didn't choke up. It was very heartfelt, but you could tell the weight of almost 30 years on the air was kind of hitting him, and all he had done and all the history he had made and all the guests he had. And I like the fact, and Journey may be able to speak to this further, that he didn't have a traditional show for that last show. There were no guests. It was just a VIP audience. There were a lot of clips of the musicians who had performed on there, and the comics who had been on there. It was kind of just a cavalcade of stars who had been on over the years, and non-stars. And then Johnny doing what he did best, just sort of bonding with the audience, because they really felt this genuine bond, like they knew this guy who had put them to bed for 29 years or however long they'd been watching. So I thought it was just a pitch-perfect finale, like few others. I loved the last MASH, I loved the last Cheers, and this is right up there with that one in my book.
Yeah, what strikes me is that I think for any of us, if you were Johnny Carson for 30 years, the risk is your ego gets out of control and it affects the art. And even in his sign-off, it's a pretty straightforward sign-off. It's not very self-indulgent. He doesn't go on and on and on about it. It's just a straightforward show of gratitude, actually. He acknowledges the audience was as much a part of it as those in the studio. And then as far as the penultimate episode with Robin Williams and Bette Midler, talk about being the nation's curator of great television. You know, he had one compass, which was entertain the audience and deliver great television. And I think that no matter what, a big reason for his success is that I don't know how, his ego never got in the way. And so he was still of service to the moment, delivering us great television, and then giving a respectful, straightforward sign-off.
Another question here in the back.
So why did NBC move The Tonight Show from New York City to Burbank? And why did NBC about a decade ago move it back to New York City?
Should I take the first half? You take the second?
I didn't hear the second half.
So why did it move from New York to Burbank and then from Burbank back to New York?
Yes.
So because Jimmy Fallon's doing it in the same studio Johnny did it in. Now, well, I mean, I think initially in 1972, they had been doing occasional stints in California in the Burbank barn, the studio that I was at months ago. I think they had been in New York for a decade. They were in New York as much as of New York, but New York didn't have the celebrities, really. And so they thought maybe going west would open them up to more, starrier guests on the show. So that was a big part of it. Johnny was reluctant to go because he loved New York. He loved living in New York. He loved the characters of New York. But, it's funny. Once Johnny got to Burbank, that's when he really became the king of late night. He was kind of a prince in New York. But once he went out to Hollywood, he took that leap, and he really became this international star. So as reluctant as he was, I think it was a brilliant, obviously, business move. I don't know much about the machinations behind the scenes of why they brought it back to New York. Maybe Journey has a little more insight into that.
I don't know either. I know the change in vibe certainly suited Carson well when he could edit and be in more control than his early years in New York. And so my guess would be that there might have been a feeling like it's time for something that feels a little more edgy and hip and lively. But Gary, maybe you maybe know more about this than me.
Lauren did have a lot to do with
Lauren
it.
Michaels,
Jimmy's
if you
in the
didn't hear.
same building as Lauren is, and he'll stop down to the set. Yeah, Lauren lords
makes
over
sense.
everything, right, at 30 Rock? Yeah. Seth is there, Jimmy's there, so yeah, you're right.
Hold on, I got to get the mic because we can't hear you. So hold on, Gary. I'm going to.
Yeah, if you didn't hear that, sir, the answer to the second part, which I think is probably true, is that you have Lorne Michaels right there in 30 Rock at NBC, and so things kind of follow him.
Lorne is a protector, and Conan lost Lorne at 11:30, which was a problem. So for a 10-month Tonight Show with Conan, so. I think, and there was something historical about going back to 6B at 30 Rock, which was very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have a question in the back. Hold on a second. I feel like Phil Donahue.
Remember getting a workout, Steve.
Here you go.
Two quick ones. Real quick one. Is there a place other than YouTube that we could see full episodes? And the second question is, who was his muse? Who did he think was the top, the best? Who did he kind of idolize?
I can answer one of those.
Yep.
Jack Benny.
Jack Benny was a huge one.
He was a huge influence on him. I do know that because I interviewed Johnny Carson. No, I didn't. I'm just kidding. But Jack Benny was a big influence.
He was probably the biggest one. Yeah. And guys like Red Skelton, Groucho Marx, who came out and did 15 minutes before the very first Tonight Show to kind of introduce Johnny to the country. I know you can see episodes nightly on Antenna TV. That's the only place I know of now. Do you know of any other channel?
No, but I know it starts and ends with Carson Entertainment Group, and it was a brilliant and innovative move. And there's a similar thing that happens with Desilu, but at a certain point in his career, the fact that Johnny Carson negotiated ownership of the episodes of the shows, this is not a typical move, and Carson Entertainment Group owns and controls them to this day. And so when people do documentaries about the history of the 1960s and 70s and they need to license a clip, they have to go to Jeff Sotzing, Johnny Carson's nephew. There's also a Johnny Carson Foundation that does philanthropic work that's fantastic. And so much like we're often talking about with Lucille Ball, and I should say at the beginning when we said we built the National Comedy Center and she said, don't build a museum about me, Jamestown did also build the Lucille Ball Desi Arnaz Museum. I should have mentioned that. So we operate both. But much like Johnny Carson, she was a business person off camera. Amazing comedian, but also an innovative business person who retained some creative control and ownership and took things to the West when people weren't taking anything out of New York at the time. So there are these parallels.
And you see that in the great documentary Amy Poehler made that Journey is in. I highly recommend the Lucy documentary if you haven't seen it.
Another question or two, go ahead.
We heard a lot about stand-up comedians getting their start, but there were a lot of musical bands that came on Carson, and how did he react to, from the musical standpoint, because he was comfortable with the comedy side, but how did he deal with the musicians and all the bands that were either introduced or on the show?
My part is only conjecture. He didn't have the connection with the musicians, except for people like Buddy Rich, because Johnny was a drummer. So he really connected with guys like that and some of the older guys that he came up with, the jazz guys. But I never got the sense that he connected with the new like rock and roll bands like he did with comics. He felt this kindred spirit with comics, and you could tell he was really on their side. There was much less of that sort of relationship, at least I got the sense, with musicians who just came on to perform on the show. Johnny loved music, and he was actually a good drummer, but I never got the sense that there was the same kind of relationship that he had with comics.
Yeah, Lorne Michaels will say music is the shortcut to cool, as he's putting together his show and his format. And I don't think Johnny Carson was trying to be cool. He was just ultimately driven by the compass of delivering laughs more than he was feeling that same thing about music, I think.
I think you're right about that. Well, aren't the coolest people never trying to be cool, really? I mean, that's...
The post-Tonight Show years, in our final minute or two, we saw Johnny Carson smoking. He died from emphysema. What were those years like for him, and what was his final year or two like?
From the people Bill talked to when he did all his research and all my reading, I mean, the final year especially seemed pretty rough. There were reports in the press that his emphysema was getting worse, and friends would call him, family members would call him, but he didn't want to bother anybody, and he had care at home, and his former assistant, Helen Sanders, even offered to move back closer to him so she could help care for him during his final months, but, there were oxygen tanks if he needed help breathing, and he would just keep lamenting these damn cigarettes. He just could not quit the cigarettes, and they were just this bane throughout his life. And he'd spend a lot of time on his yacht. He had this big new yacht, his second giant one called Serengeti, that he sailed to Africa, went on safari, and so that was his solace. He had a satellite hookup out there, he had his email, he could go read and just sort of lord over the ocean. But that's part of what he did during his final days. He just never wanted to he didn't want to be a bother. He was this Midwestern guy at heart and never wanted to be a burden.
So I'm going to give you the last word in a moment, your favorite story. The book, by the way, is available for sale afterwards. It's fabulous. I mean, it's a really, really well-done book. Congratulations to you. And all the work that went into it.
Most props go to Bill Zehme, but thank you for that. I'm glad I could finish it for him.
So please, if you have a chance, pick it up. It's a page-turner. Let me just go back, though, to the careers that Johnny Carson started over 30 years. I mean, just an incredible legacy of young talent that appreciated the fact that Carson gave them a break. It wasn't just the Bob Hopes and the Don Rickles. It was young talent through and through.
Yeah, I love looking at the early appearances of Jerry Seinfeld, and he hasn't become as confident. So a young Jerry Seinfeld, a young Bill Maher, a young Ellen DeGeneres, and I can hear Johnny's voice saying all of these names. Richard Pryor, George Carlin, Paula Poundstone, Roseanne Barr. The performance Roseanne Barr does on Carson is Domestic Goddess, and it just cements her in an iconic way that's, again, launches her career. I don't know if I said a young Byron Allen. I think he was 17 when he was on the show. We mentioned Freddie Prinze. So, yeah, and there's nothing like it today.
So I do encourage, it's only 45 minutes away. We were joking, I live in Washington, D.C., and only when friends and family come do we see the monuments, but it is a true treasure to go to the National Comedy Center, and it's not a museum. It is a center that's living and breathing. So you get the final word. There are a lot of stories in this book. Give us one of them.
Oh, my. There are so many stories. I mean, not to end on a somber note, but, I was just taken with the way Johnny reacted when his son Ricky died in 1991, shortly before Johnny's going into his final year. To me, that was really a revelatory moment because Johnny didn't wear his heart on his sleeve. He was not an overtly emotional guy most of the time. But just, talking with people and reading the interviews that people gave to Bill about how Johnny reacted when Ricky died. Johnny always lamented that he wasn't closer to his sons as a father, but you could tell he really loved Ricky and his other sons, but because Ricky died, he expressed this emotion that had not been out there before, and he did the eulogy for him on the air. So to me, that was probably the most revealing thing about the real Johnny Carson in the book.
Journey, Mike, thank you very much. We're going to have Jacob do
Thank
the music
you.
one more time. Thank you all for being with us. The book signing and sale is behind us.
Thank you.
And we'll see you tomorrow night.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.